Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Argue, where I go on the internet, I accept your hot takes, your unpopular opinions, and your tough questions. This is the second installment of a special focused episode where I essentially asked you guys, in your opinion, what is the most overrated album and why? And I responded to this next batch of best responses as such. Rodeo. I find the production on there to be pretty bad. Nothing much on the album interests me. Bad how? How is it bad? The beat on Antidote bangs. I mean, the production is so heavy and fat and lush and enveloping on so many tracks. It helped set the current spacey psychedelic trapscapes that we hear all over the music scene right now. I don't know. I love the production on Rodeo. It's just really visceral and spacey and just puts me in a place. It's a vibe. New Lana Del Rey. Vocals are sleepy as always, but everyone's hyping it up, including you, bro. I don't know if you noticed, man, but a lot of Lana naysayers kind of turned around on this record. And look, there's literally no reason for me personally to just start up and enjoying Lana's music like out of the blue. If you've been watching my reviews, you must have noticed that I've been enjoying more and more of Lana's music on her records over the years, seeing improvements in songwriting, production. Often some of her most recent works would maybe get artificially low scores because I thought detours such as featuring A$AP Rocky multiple times on one album was a waste of time and just resulted in really bad tracks. Maybe you're the type of person who just doesn't like Lana's sound, doesn't like Lana's aesthetic, no matter how it's packaged. But even if I don't think Lana has developed the most interesting aesthetic of any musical artist of all time, I think it's occasionally my job to look past, the window dressing a little bit and see that under the hood, hey, maybe there actually are some interesting lyrics, maybe there actually are some good songs, and maybe actually there is some fantastic production on this record. And for as sleepy as Lana's music is, you can't really deny that it's instantly recognizable and uniquely her, even with there being some copycats over the years. So, I don't know. I love the new Lana Del Rey. You guys already know that by now, and I think every bit of hype this new album has gotten is well deserved. I still really enjoy the album, and it's pretty innovative for being released in 1969, but In the Court of the Crimson King is overrated AF. It's really bloated, and Moonchild is mostly ambient nonsense. Most of its musical ideas could be conveyed in a much shorter amount of time. Dude. You talk about In the Court of the Crimson King like it's a fucking 3-hour epic. It's not a super long album. It's not like the longest album in this. It's not even a double album. I mean, okay, in the track listing, I guess Moonchild can be interpreted as a bit of a lull. But for the most part, I think it's a pretty song. Look, I think there are a lot of records that over the years that are considered classic that you could say are a little overly long or demand too much from the listener. Joanna Newsom's Have One on Me. Hell, even one of my favorites, the Beatles' White Album. Even Kamasi Washington's The Epic, if you're not breaking it down into separate records and discs. But, geez. Like, In the Court of the Crimson King, it's like you could literally just like make yourself dinner and just sit down and listen to that whole thing and chill. Low End Theory is super dull and mixed like trash. It isn't impressive lyrically or production-wise at all. Why? How? Why are you saying this? I mean, it's a little dusty and lo-fi, but a lot of great hip-hop records in the 90s were especially some of the more jazz rap style. The horns sound great, the fat boom bap drums sound great. And lyrically, I mean, it's just a fun little clever vibey type of record with some funny observational lyrics here and there. That's kind of what Tribe did. That's what they specialized in. They weren't the only group in the jazz rap wave around that time that were basically going down that same road. Groups like De La Soul were even funnier and a little more tongue-in-cheek. I mean, being super high concept wasn't so much a prevailing trend in jazz rap around this time. Just do not agree. I just don't agree at all. Ramones' self-titled debut and Nevermind the Bollocks are both wildly overrated and contextually uncreative. VU explored fast, chunky, overdriven punk as early as 67, and by 77, bands had seen a decade of punk and were beginning to invent post-punk a la Talking Heads, The Fall, Joy Division. The Ramones, Sex Pistols, and I would argue the debut album from The Clash, while there are great tracks on those records, and I used to love the shit out of those records back when I was in high school, they are all very boilerplate punk music. And saying the bands were kind of late to the party is a bit of a given. I mean, the Sex Pistols and the UK scene in general came after what American proto-punk set the stage for down the road, and there are a bunch of American proto-punk records that I would rather listen to than any number of Ramones albums, like the entire Stooges discography, or like, I don't know, Modern Lovers. I mean, look, Nevermind the Bollocks I think is good. It's an enjoyable record. It's far from the best punk album. Those Sex Pistols came onto the scene with the attitude, the look, the aesthetic, everything that punk would be defined by as far as its look. And Ramones as well. Although the Ramones, I mean, they have a lot of great tracks, but for the whole discography that they have, you could fit every great and essential Ramones song probably onto one compilation record, which should most definitely contain Today You're Loved, Tomorrow the World, or You're an Asshole. Abbey Road is the most overrated album the Beatles ever released. While it contains two of their most popular tracks, that doesn't make it a good album. The album gets harder to listen to the deeper it goes. It's always seemed lackluster in oomph. Because is pretty sick though. How? I mean, the deeper you go into the album, you get that fun medley on the back end. Here Comes the Sun is gorgeous. And talking about a lack of oomph with a record that has I Want You, She's So Heavy on it. Bow now now, bow, bow, bow. That is heavy as fuck. I'm sorry, my guy, but it is heavy. I'll agree that Maxwell's Silver Hammer and Octopus's Garden is like a little goofy, but I don't know. I think the Beatles kind of already broke that seal on White Album, and they're still fun songs. I just I don't agree. I don't get it. The Antlers, Hospice, because it relies more on emotional reaction from its audience than actual substance. Its narrative kind of crumbles when you consider its lack of subtlety, and there's not much going on instrumentally that's alluring or forward-thinking enough to save it. Yeah, that and the production kind of bites. It is washed out as hell to the point where it just sounds hollow and flavorless. Shit, now people are going to think that I wrote this, which I mean, I might as well have written this. This is what I felt for years now. Yeah, I've never understood the Hospice hype. Pet sounds, no barks, no meows, not even a blub blub. Despicable. I don't even know if I want to address this one. There are literally animal sounds on the record at one point, so I mean, you know, come on. The Doors. The Doors. Strange Days and Waiting for the Sun had better compositions, album visions, and performances. The performances on The Doors were laughably loose and painful at times. The Doors' debut record can be a little rough around the edges, but it wouldn't be the first time a band burst onto the scene or broke on through with a sound that was, yeah, a little rough. Look at the Led Zeppelin debut record. Does not mean that there weren't some great songs on that record and that the band didn't come through with a pretty interesting and instantaneously recognizable sound. And as much as you can kind of point out how blemished some points of the debut are, it is not as rough or as laughable as some tracks on LA Woman. And hey, you know, the track Soul Kitchen, for example, would we even have Smash Mouth if not for that song? I mean, that track is pretty much just like, you know, proto Walking on the Sun. To Pimp a Butterfly, while it is unquestionably a solid release, it's largely a continuation of ideas and theatrics that were teased on Good Kid, Mad City. It's an experience worth having, but its narrative threads are more frayed than people want to admit, and there is plenty of fat to trim. Okay, themes get continued off of Good Kid, Mad City, and I would argue those themes get improved upon, or at least are presented with a different narrative, in a different style, in a different story. I get that not every track bangs, especially on the back end of the record, but I'm not really seeing where the narrative spots fray out. I mean, it's all pretty concrete to me in terms of it just being the singular experience of Kendrick Lamar dealing with the trials and tribulations of becoming a famous person and trying to maintain his identity, his authenticity, his self-worth, his human spirit, his down-to-earth mindset, his connections to where he's from and the people he loves. Is This It has a ton of great tracks, but every time I listen to it, the lack of diversity in its sound makes even the lean 35 minutes of runtime seem like it slightly overstays its welcome. Yeah, I mean, look, I love the debut Strokes record, and I'm totally fine with arguments that it is the best Strokes record, but do I think it's like one of the greatest rock records or one of the greatest records of all time? Not really. You know, it's just a nice, tight, little poppy rock album with a lot of great tunes on it. It's not like, you know, the greatest thing ever written, and also I would argue that Room on Fire is just as good, and it's totally arguable that that album is better. OK Computer, it fits solidly within alt-rock conventions of the time and doesn't take any sonic risks. Kid A, on the other hand, I think it's kind of disingenuous to say that OK Computer takes no sonic risks at all. I mean, there's some pretty gnarly guitar tones on that record. On top of it, you could argue, and this is my feeling on the record personally, I think that OK Computer builds, or rather takes, some of those alt-rock conventions of the time that they were in and sterilizes them to the point where they are a reflection of a dead, cold, and very neurotic world. And I like that about it. I think that is a great quality about it. Is it as electronic or as experimental as Kid A? No, but I also think it's more consistent than Kid A and thoroughly enjoyable than Kid A. And while there are elements of OK Computer you could say are conventional or comparable to that of alternative rock and maybe even Britpop bands from the same era like Oasis or The Verve, the record is nowhere near as conventional or as average as Pablo Honey or even the Bends. And that is going to be it for this latest episode of Let's Argue. Thank you very much for all of you putting in your opinions on what the most overrated albums are. Maybe we'll do this again. Maybe throw some suggestions down there as to maybe what topic you'd like to all go in on at once and focus on that topic. Maybe we'll do more focused topic episodes in the future. And I love you. I love you, I love you, I love you. Anthony Fantano, Let's Argue. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out, and we will see you in the next one. Anthony Fantano, Argue Forever.